All right, ready to dive in.
Yeah.
Today, we're looking at Cipla Ltd.
Cipla Ltd.
Yeah, a pharmaceutical company that's been making some noise. We've got all sorts of reports, company data, the whole nine yards.
Hmm.
And basically, we're trying to figure out how they're playing the game.
Yeah.
What's their strategy? How are they actually performing? What are the signs, kind of hinting at what they might do in the future?
Well, you know what's really interesting?
Exactly.
Cipla, they describe themselves very simply, and this is a direct quote, engaged in the business of pharmaceuticals.
Hmm.
Seems pretty straightforward, right?
Yeah.
Almost too obvious. But I think it actually says a lot about their focus, their commitment.
Yeah, it's like they're saying, we're not here to play games. We're here for the medicine, the real deal.
Absolutely.
And speaking of being serious about medicine, they've got a pretty impressive market position in India.
Oh, yeah.
They're the third largest player in the entire domestic prescription drug market.
That's huge.
Yeah, I mean, that's not just big. That's a sign that they're really,
Deep penetration, yeah.
a deep penetration into the market.
Yeah.
What do you think the implications of that are?
Well, think about it. A significant portion of the Indian population is relying on Cipla for their medicines, for essential treatments.
A lot of responsibility.
It is. And it gives them a lot of influence, especially when it comes to things like pricing and access to those medications.
Okay, so they're big, but are they good? Like, are they just churning out generic pills? Or are they focusing on anything specific?
Well, they've actually carved out a really interesting niche in a few key therapeutic areas. Like, for instance, they're the leaders in respiratory medications in India.
Respiratory.
Yeah, and it makes sense when you consider the air quality challenges in a lot of parts of India. It's a big problem.
That's smart.
Right.
Target a pressing need.
Exactly.
But it's not just about sort of jumping on a trend, right? Like, to be number one in something like respiratory care, you have to have real expertise.
Absolutely. Deep knowledge, experience. And they haven't stopped there.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they're also in the top 5 for urology and anti-infectives, which is pretty impressive.
Yeah.
It shows that they're not afraid to specialize, you know?
Yeah.
And in the pharmaceutical world, depth can often be more valuable than just trying to be everything to everyone. Cipla seems to understand that.
Now, there's something in this report that really caught my eye. They've got this platform. It's called Digital Breathe Free.
Digital Breathe Free.
And it has something like 500,000 downloads, which, yeah, it's pretty impressive.
Oh.
What's going on there? Are they, branching out beyond just the pills and potions?
I think it's a really fascinating example of how these pharma companies are adapting to the digital age we live in. I mean, think about it. Digital Breathe Free could give patients a direct line to managing their respiratory health. Maybe it's personalized information, tracking symptoms, even sending medication reminders.
It's almost like having a healthcare professional right there in your pocket, 24/7.
Exactly, yeah.
And speaking of reaching patients, Cipla has this massive field force, over 7,500 people.
That's a lot of people.
Yeah, and they're dedicated to building relationships with doctors, educating them about Cipla's products.
Yeah.
That's their main job. What do you make of that?
Well, it translates to a pretty amazing stat, actually. 85% of physicians in India prescribe at least one Cipla product.
Wow.
That kind of market penetration doesn't just happen overnight. It takes a concerted effort to build that trust and demonstrate real value to healthcare providers.
All right, so they've clearly got India covered. But what about their global ambitions? Are they, just a big fish in a small pond, or are they making waves internationally?
They're definitely expanding their reach. There's no question about it.
Yeah.
They're the third largest player in what's called the SAGA market, and that stands for Sub-Saharan Africa, the Gulf, and Asia.
Wow, that's a huge market. What makes that area SAGA so strategic for a company like Cipla, do you think?
Well, think about the demographics. You've got rapid population growth, increasing urbanization, rising incomes. All of that translates to a growing demand for healthcare, including pharmaceuticals.
Right.
So for Cipla being a leader in SAGA, it means they're positioning themselves really well for some serious future growth.
It's like getting in on the ground floor of a market that's about to explode.
Exactly. Yeah.
And it looks like they're setting their sights even further afield. They're the fastest growing generic player in North America. That's a big deal.
That's a huge deal.
Yeah.
The North American market is incredibly competitive.
Oh, yeah.
You've got all the established players, the big names, and really strict regulations. So for Cipla to be growing so rapidly there, it suggests that they've found a winning formula.
What do you think that formula is?
Well, I suspect it's a combination of high-quality generics offered at very competitive prices.
Makes sense. So Cipla's global ambitions are pretty clear, but what about their financials? Are they a solid investment, or are there some cracks beneath the surface? What does the data tell us?
It's kind of a mixed bag.
Oh,
Yeah, on one hand, they're practically debt-free, which is a great position to be in.
yeah, that gives them a lot of flexibility.
Absolutely. And they've seen really impressive profit growth. We're talking a 25.1% compound annual growth rate over the past 5 years.
That's pretty remarkable.
It is.
Yeah.
And they're sharing the wealth with investors, too, through a healthy dividend payout, about 22%.
So far, so good.
Yeah.
But there are maybe some red flags, some things that make you kind of close an eyebrow.
Yeah, there are definitely some things to consider. The data shows that their sales growth has been a bit sluggish, around 9.51% over the past 5 years.
It's not terrible, but
It's not great.
yeah.
And there's been this decline in what's called promoter holding, which means those who have a controlling stake in the company have been selling off some of their shares.
So what do you make of that? Is that something to be concerned about?
Well, the slow sales growth could be a sign of trouble brewing. Are they having difficulty launching new products? Is there increased competition they're facing? It's something we'll need to dig into a bit deeper. As for the declining promoter holding, it's not necessarily a bad thing in and of itself.
Right.
There could be various reasons for it. Maybe they're just diversifying their investments, or maybe they're raising capital for expansion.
It's like a financial puzzle, isn't it?
Absolutely.
You have to look at all the pieces to really figure out what the picture is telling you. I think a good next step would be to take a closer look at their quarterly results, maybe their profit and loss statement, see if we can glean any more clues from those.
Yeah, those statements can offer a lot of valuable insight into any company's financial health. Let's see what Cipla's numbers are telling us.
Looking at their quarterly revenue, there's definitely an upward trend.
Yeah, good sign.
They're generating consistent income, which is, always reassuring. But their operating profit seems to fluctuate quite a bit. Up and down, up and down.
Right, and that fluctuation could be due to a number of different things. It might reflect changes in production costs, maybe they're facing some pricing pressure from competitors, or it could even be because we're making some strategic investments, in research and development or things like that.
Okay, so revenue's generally going up, but those profit margins are a little bit unpredictable. What about earnings per share? Isn't that a pretty key indicator for investors?
Yeah, absolutely. Earnings per share, or EPS, is a big one.
Hmm.
And the good news is Cipla's EPS has been steadily growing.
That's good.
This suggests that they're becoming more profitable, at least on a per-share basis, and that's generally a very positive sign for investors.
All right, let's circle back to this shareholding pattern thing. We talked about that decline in promoter holding. What exactly does that mean? And should investors be worried about it?
Well, so think of promoters as kind of the company's founders or those with a controlling interest. When their stake decreases, it can definitely raise some questions.
Like what?
Well, are they losing faith in the company? Are they cashing out? Or could it be part of a larger, more strategic move, like bringing in new investors who could potentially add some value? It's hard to say for sure without more information.
It's like we're playing detective here,
A little bit, yeah.
trying to decipher the clues and figure out what's really going on behind the scenes. Speaking of clues, there have been some interesting announcements from Cipla lately that might shed some more light on their operations and their overall strategy.
Oh, yeah, those announcements can be really telling sometimes. Let's take a closer look and see what we can learn.
Okay, so the first one that caught my attention is this U.S. Food and Drug Administration, the FDA.
The FDA, yeah.
They conducted an inspection of Cipla's manufacturing facility in Bengaluru,
Okay.
and the inspection turned up 8 observations.
8 observations.
Yeah. What does that mean for Cipla, do you think?
Well, the FDA plays a really crucial role in ensuring the safety and quality of pharmaceuticals that are sold in the U.S.
Right. Incredibly important.
So when they conduct inspections, they're looking for any deviations from their very strict standards.
And 8 observations. Is that a lot?
It's hard to say without knowing the specifics.
Like-
It could be anything from, very minor procedural issues to some more serious concerns. It's a wide range, really.
So, not great news, but not necessarily a disaster.
Right. It really depends on the nature of those observations and how Cipla responds to them.
It's like a test, I guess.
It is, in a way. Can they demonstrate that their quality systems are robust and, take appropriate corrective action.
So a swift and effective response is probably going to be key here.
Absolutely. It'll go a long way towards maintaining the FDA's approval, which is essential for continued access to the U.S. market.
Which is a huge market for them, obviously.
Huge.
Okay, so the FDA inspection is something we'll definitely want to keep an eye on.
For sure.
What other announcements kind of caught your attention?
Well, there's this one about Cipla allotting 17,064 equity shares under their employee stock ownership plan and their employee stock purchase plan.
ESOPs, for short.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, those acronyms always make my head spin.
They can be a mouthful, can't they?
Yeah. Can you break it down for us? What exactly do those plans mean?
Sure. So basically, ESOPs and ESPSs are ways for companies to offer stock ownership to their employees. It's a form of compensation and a way to really align employees' interests with the company's performance.
So they're giving their employees a piece of the pie, so to speak.
In a way, yes.
And I'm guessing that's a pretty good way to attract and retain top talent.
It can be. It can definitely boost morale and encourage those employees to contribute to the company's long-term success. But, it's important to keep in mind that it can also lead to the dilution of existing shares.
Right. So it's a move that can have both positive and negative implications.
Exactly. There are always trade-offs.
It seems like with Cipla, there's always more than meets the eye. We've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our deep dive.
We have.
You know, their dominance in India, their aspirations to go global, their financial strengths and weaknesses, and then these little hints we're getting from those recent announcements. It's pretty fascinating.
It really is. There's a lot to unpack here, for sure. And this is just the beginning. There's so much more to explore about Cipla. I'm really intrigued to see where this all leads.
Me too.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what we're going to do in part 2. We'll dig even deeper into Cipla's strategic moves,
Okay.
the challenges they face, and what the future might hold for this, really interesting player on the global healthcare stage. So stay tuned.
I can't wait. Back again for more on Cipla Ltd.
So we've learned that Cipla is a real powerhouse, especially in India. But they're not without their challenges, right?
Right.
Slow sales growth, those FDA observations, makes you wonder if they're maybe trying to do too much too quickly.
I think that's a valid question. It really gets to the core of their strategy, their decision-making.
Yeah.
And maybe a good place to start is with that U.S. FDA inspection.
Okay.
Those 8 observations they got at their facility in Bengaluru.
Right.
It really highlights how intense the scrutiny is for these pharmaceutical companies, especially when they're dealing with a market as big and important as the U.S.
It's high stakes.
Oh, absolutely.
One wrong move, and they could lose access to a massive market.
Absolutely. The FDA has incredibly high standards for quality and safety, and they don't mess around.
Right.
But, the interesting thing is that getting observations during an inspection isn't all that uncommon.
Really?
Yeah, it happens. It's more about how the company handles those observations. That's what really matters.
So do like a test, you're saying?
Yeah, kind of. Can they show that their quality systems are up to snuff? That they can take corrective action and do it quickly and efficiently.
So it's an opportunity for them to, prove themselves.
Exactly. A chance to demonstrate their commitment to compliance, to continuous improvement. A quick and transparent response goes a long way in building confidence.
With the FDA, and I guess with the market in general.
Absolutely, yeah.
But it's not just the FDA they have to worry about. I mean, they've got competition coming at them from all sides, don't they?
Yeah, competition in this industry is fierce. You've got generic drug manufacturers going head-to-head, and then you've got the big-name branded pharmaceutical companies. And as patents expire, more and more drugs become eligible for generic production. So it's a constantly changing landscape.
So how does a company like Cipla actually stand out in such a crowded space?
I think that's where their strategy of specialization comes in.
Okay.
Focusing on specific areas, like we talked about before, respiratory, urology,
Right.
allows them to build deep expertise and really differentiate themselves.
Right.
And remember that digital breathe-free platform.
Yeah.
That's another way they're setting themselves apart. Engaging directly with patients, offering more than just medications. It's about building a whole ecosystem.
Interesting. But all that innovation, all that competition, it must put a lot of pressure on pricing.
Oh, yeah.
How do they balance keeping medications affordable while also, staying profitable?
It's a constant balancing act. Generic drugs, by their nature, are priced lower than the brand name counterparts.
Right.
So Cipla has to walk this fine line between being competitive on price
Mm-hmm.
and also making sure that they're financially sustainable in the long run.
So it's not just about being the biggest player, it's about being smart.
Exactly. It's about being adaptable, being strategic.
And that brings us to their global expansion, right? I mean, we know they're doing really well in Saga, fastest growing in North America,
Hmm.
but is it just about, reaching more customers, or is there something more to it?
I think it goes deeper than just expanding the customer base. It's also about diversifying their revenue streams,
Makes sense.
spreading the risk a little bit.
Yeah, like a safety net, in a way.
Exactly. If one market takes a hit, they've got others to rely on. But of course, navigating these global markets, it's no walk in the park.
Oh, I bet. It's complicated.
Different healthcare needs, different regulatory environments, and then you've got the political and economic uncertainties that are always swirling around out there. It's a lot to juggle.
So back to their finances for a second. We saw some strengths, like being almost entirely debt-free.
Mm-hmm.
And they've got that really impressive profit growth.
Yeah.
But then there's that sluggish sales growth. What are they doing to try and address that?
Well, one thing they're doing is investing heavily in research and development,
Okay.
focusing on developing new products, differentiated products, things that set them apart.
So innovation is key.
It's absolutely essential in this industry. You've got to stay ahead of the curve, anticipate what's coming next.
And that's not easy in the pharmaceutical world.
It's not easy at all. They're also expanding their product portfolio through acquisitions and partnerships.
Yeah.
Collaborating with other companies gives them access to new technologies, new markets. It's a way to accelerate their growth.
So they're not afraid to shake things up, try new things.
Exactly, yeah.
I'm still a little hung up on that decline in promoter holding. Should we read anything into that, you think? Is that a red flag or is it something else?
It's definitely worth paying attention to.
Yeah.
We need to ask the right questions, Are these promoters selling shares to fund other ventures? Are they bringing in some new strategic investors? Or is it, could it possibly be a sign that they're losing confidence in the company's future? It's hard to say for certain without more information.
It's like trying to crack a code, isn't it?
It is a bit, yeah.
The numbers are telling us something, but we have
Mhm.
to figure out what it means. And that's why these recent announcements we talked about, they're so interesting. They can give us a little peek behind the curtain.
Yeah, a little context for some of these financial moves.
Like that FDA inspection. 8 observations isn't great, but it's how Cipla deals with it that's really going to tell the story.
Right. Exactly. And then there's that whole thing with allotting shares under the ESOPS programs.
Right.
It tells me they're really focused on incentivizing their workforce, keeping those employees happy and engaged.
Yeah. Aligning the interests of the employees with the shareholders.
Which is good in theory, but, it also has that potential downside of diluting existing shares.
Right. So it's a trade-off.
Always trade-offs.
Cipla's not a company that sits still, that's for sure.
No, they don't.
They're always innovating, expanding, adapting. But are they taking on too much risk with all this activity? Is it sustainable?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Bold moves always come with a certain level of risk.
So where do we stand? Big picture, what's your take? Are they a company on the rise, or are they headed for a fall?
Honestly, it's too early to say for sure. We've uncovered a lot of interesting details, but there are still some pieces missing from the puzzle. We need to dig a little deeper.
Okay, well, let's do that then. Stay tuned for part 3, where we'll wrap up our Cipla deep dive. We'll connect all the dots, analyze the risks and rewards, and explore what the future might hold for this company. Welcome back. It's the final part of our deep dive on Cipla. We've really dug into their financials, looked at their strategies, and found some clues, about where they might be headed in the future.
Yeah, we've seen how they became so strong in India, their plans to grow globally, that real dedication to innovation. But we've also seen some potential problems.
Right.
Like that slow sales growth and those observations from the FDA.
Definitely things to keep in mind.
Yeah, for sure.
It's been a really fascinating look at Cipla.
It has.
But now I think it's time to kind of zoom out a little.
Okay.
Look at the bigger picture. What does Cipla's story tell us about the pharmaceutical industry as a whole? How it's changing.
I think Cipla's story is a really good example of how much power the Indian pharmaceutical industry is gaining. They've gone from being this local company to a global force, challenging how things have always been done and making medicines that people can actually afford.
It's like a real David and Goliath story.
It is.
Shows what Indian companies can do.
Yeah, definitely a sign of what's to come, I think.
I think their focus on specific areas like we talked about, respiratory and urology,
Right.
that's been a big part of their success.
Absolutely.
They've built up so much expertise in those areas, It really gives them an advantage.
Yeah, that depth of knowledge is really valuable.
And the way they're using technology, like that digital breathe-free platform,
Right.
it shows they're not afraid to push the boundaries.
No, they're not.
Find new ways to, deliver healthcare.
Absolutely. Thinking outside the box.
Cipla's expansion around the world, especially in Saga and North America. Yeah. I think it shows how interconnected the pharmaceutical market is becoming.
It's true.
They're not just selling products, they're sharing their knowledge, their expertise.
Contributing to this global healthcare system.
It's like they're changing the rules of the game.
Yeah.
Showing that you can have high quality and affordability at the same time.
You don't have to choose one or the other.
And I think their success in places like North America
That's huge.
shows that people really want generics.
They do.
They're realizing they don't have to pay a fortune for their medicine,
It's making a difference.
putting pressure on those big companies to lower their prices.
Yeah, exactly.
Cipla's story really highlights how important it is to be adaptable,
Oh, for sure.
to be resilient. The pharmaceutical industry is changing all the time.
Constantly.
New challenges popping up,
Left and right.
whether it's regulations, pricing pressures, or even global health crises. These companies have to be quick on their feet.
Yeah, they have to be able to pivot, be innovative to survive.
Cipla's definitely made some tough choices, taken some risks.
Calculated risks, hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully.
But calculated or not, they had to adapt to stay in the game.
And it seems like they've really created a culture where employees feel valued.
Yeah, that's important.
Those ESOPs and ESPSs.
Right.
That's a good example.
It is.
They're giving employees a real stake in the company.
Sharing the success.
So it's not just about profits for Cipla. It's about their people, about building a future that lasts.
That's a good sign.
Now, let's think big picture for a minute.
Okay.
What kind of role do you think companies like Cipla can play in shaping the future of healthcare? I mean, they're already helping people get access to medicine.
Right, but I think they can go even further.
Yeah.
They could become real leaders in addressing global health challenges.
Like what?
Things like antimicrobial resistance or the increasing number of people with chronic diseases. Those are huge problems.
Huge problems that need everyone to work together.
Exactly. And Cipla, they could partner with research institutions, governments, other companies, use their resources, their expertise to find new treatments, new ways to deliver healthcare.
It's exciting to think about.
It is.
And that digital platform of theirs, the potential is huge.
Oh.
They could educate patients, collect data, personalize healthcare in ways we haven't even imagined yet.
It's a really interesting time to be in the healthcare world, and Cipla's right at the forefront.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's your final verdict? Is Cipla a force for good, or are they just another company trying to make money?
I think they're a company with a conscience, you know? They really seem to want to make a difference in the world, and they're not afraid to shake things up a bit.
Yeah, they're definitely not afraid to challenge the status quo.
But they're also a business, and they have to make money to stay afloat.
Right, of course.
But it seems like they've found a way to balance those two things, purpose and profit.
I think you're right. They're not perfect, but they're trying to do the right thing.
Yeah, and that's something worth supporting.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive on Cipla.
It does.
We hope you enjoyed learning about this fascinating company that's making such a big impact on the pharmaceutical world.
Yeah, we've just scratched the surface here.
If you're interested in learning more, check out their website. Look at their investor relations materials.
There's a ton of information out there.
And keep an eye on their progress.
Oh, yeah.
I have a feeling we're going to be hearing a lot more about Cipla in the years to come.
I think so, too.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.